Okay, welcome back. Here is part two of our series of videos this week talking about circles. In our last video, we talked about the length of an arc, which we realized was really just a portion or a fraction of the circumference. Today, we're going to talk about the area of what's called a sector, and a sector is just a portion of a circle. It kind of looks like a wedge, like this. To do this, we have to remind ourselves how we find the area of a whole circle, which is a very famous formula I know you've learned before, pi r squared. Square the radius, multiply it by pi. Let's say I wanted to find the area of this sector right here. Well, even if you didn't know the formula for doing this, you could probably figure it out just by looking at the measurements you're given, right? If I'm going to find the area of this small sector here, the shaded region, I probably first want to find the area of the entire circle, which is given by pi r squared. And my radius here is 20, so I would do pi times 20 squared. And keeping my answer exact, 20 squared is 400, and so I would get the exact answer of 400 pi, and that would be square centimeters. But we don't actually want the entire circle. We just want this little 45-degree wedge. So the question becomes, well, how much of the circle is this? And because we know that angle, we can figure that out. This wedge is 45 degrees out of a total possible 360. Simplifying this fraction, you would get 1/8. So the area of this sector is actually the circle area times 1/8, or divided by 8. And so 400 pi times 1/8 would be 50 pi. And so now we know the area of that sector is 50 pi square centimeters. But this process we can boil down to a formula if we think about what we just did. We found the area of the entire circle, and then we multiplied it by what fraction of the sector that we're looking for. This is very similar to how we found arc length when we were taking the circumference of the circle and multiplying it by the fraction of the circle that the arc took up. This is the very same idea. So, to summarize this, sector area, a sector is the shaded region, a sector is a region bounded by two radii, here, and an arc here of a circle. To find the area of a sector, you must know two things. You need to know the measure of the arc, or what we call the intercepted arc, and the radius. If you know those two things, we can figure this out. So just like we saw above, to find the sector area, we need to know what fraction of the circle that we're looking for. To do that, we need to know the measure of this arc that it intercepts. Now, in my diagram, I use the letter A. I'm actually going to change this to M so that I'm consistent with my last video. I also like M better because then it would stand for measure. And so I'm going to take the measure of that arc over 360, and that tells me what fraction of the circle I'm looking at. I'm going to multiply that by the area, which is pi r squared. And here is our sector area formula. So let's look at a couple examples here. As we saw above, to find the area of this shaded region, we're going to need to know two things. We need to know the measure of this arc, which I'm going to call M. We also need to know the radius. Now, right away, I can see what the radius is. They're showing me this segment here. This is a diameter of 10. So cutting that in half, right away, I know that my radius is 5. Now I need to figure out the measure of this arc. Well, I can do a little detective work here, and if this is a diameter, then this would be half the circle, or 180 degrees. So if I subtract that 72, I know that this angle right here is 108. And if this is 108, then the measure of my arc is also 108. Now I have enough to find the sector area. So my sector area is given by arc measure over 360 times pi r squared. Now again, you may be tempted to plug all this into your calculator, in which case you would just get sort of a decimal approximation. I want an exact answer here. So the first thing I'm going to do is simplify this fraction. And so we got 108 over 360. I'm going to figure this out on my calculator here. This simplifies down to 3/10. And of course here we have 5 squared is 25, so we have 25 pi. So 3/10 times 25 pi. That would become 75 pi over 10. And simplifying that, 75 pi over 10, divide both of those by 5, and we would get 15 pi over 2. And there is the area of the shaded region, the shaded sector. Okay, so again, notice I'm leaving my answer in simplified form in terms of pi. I'm leaving pi in my answer. That's important here. One more example. The shaded region in this one is much larger, as we can see, but the process will be the same here. I need to figure out, well, what's my radius and what is the measure of this arc? Now, in this case, this is a major arc. I need to figure out the measure of the arc that goes from this point all the way around to this point. So the radius, well, that's easy. The diameter is marked as 6, so my radius is 3. Done. For the arc measure, we're given this central angle 45. Well, the measure of this arc here is going to be 360 minus that 45, which of course is 315 degrees. And if this angle is 315 degrees, then the measure of this arc is also 315 degrees. Now I have everything I need. All right, so sector area is given by arc measure over 360 times pi r squared. Again, I'm not going to plug this all into my calculator. I'm going to simplify it down, keeping it in terms of pi. So 315 over 360 will simplify into 7/8. And 3 squared is 9. So 7/8 times 9 pi. 7/8 times 9, that's going to be 63 over 8. So 63 pi over 8. And you could try to simplify 63 over 8, and it would not happen. So we can leave our answer there. And this is our final simplified answer in terms of pi. Okay, so you can see the similarities between sector area and arc length. In both cases, we need to figure out the measure of the arc that we're working with, and we also need the radius of the circle. If you have those two things, use our formula and simplify. Hopefully this was helpful. Again, I've posted a assignment for this week that has some practice with arc length and sector area. Give those a shot and have a great week. Till next time, see you then.